So I really want to tell you that you should strive to pay off your home and pay off your debts. But as you're doing that, strive to build stronger relationships with people around you. And I know that this is kind of a really tricky thing for you to do. There's a tension that we feel. And I'm a very strong believer in the fact that you should live a simple life where you pay off your home and you just live within your means and do that. And in fact, that's what we did. Um, I remember telling somebody, I think I was 32 years old, and I said we were going to pay off our home by the time we were 40. And um, people looked at like that person looked at me like I was nuts. Um, but my parents never had a mortgage. They had a very small mortgage, but they lived in a garage for a couple of years to save up for their home, and they paid everything off. And so I wanted to live a life like that. And there's sort of a popular right wing radio host, Dave Ramsey, is on the radio, and I was realized that, well, crap, that was my life, what he was sort of telling, and we actually did okay. We had, my kid or there were six of us in the family, six kids, mom and dad, and it was just my dad working. So to be able to do that is pretty wonderful. And he didn't have a spectacular job or anything like that. It was just kind of a regular, very blue collar pulp and paper mill operator. Um, so what I wanted to do is actually pay this home off. And when I told this person, they looked at me like I was nuts. Um, and yet we did. We by the time I was 40, I think I was 40, and well, shoot, I think I think it was before my 40th birthday that we were actually able to do that, and it looked really nuts at the time. Like when I said that, we did have a lot. The mortgage was really big, and we're fortunate enough. Both my wife and I work. We're fortunate enough to live in a town where housing prices are not that big, but all of those things are a decision. Um, People forget that this is what's called an endogenous choice, that um, we were making decisions based on being able to do all those kind of things, right? So my wife and I worked because we chose to do that as a family. We moved to partly there's a lot of luck involved, but partly the reason where we're living right now is because we were choosing to live more modestly, and we didn't look at some places, or we turned we're sort of not looking in certain areas because it was so expensive um, to live in those particular things. Now in the academic market, it's tricky because you don't really have a lot of opportunity in terms of picking and choosing, but that was definitely part of it. So a lot of the decisions that we made since we were married, and in fact, it was before we were married, and we were married when we were 25. So probably by the time we were 23, we were kind of on the same page in a lot of things. We actually have been remarkably on the same page with finances. And what we've done as a family unit is work together and trade off different things. And that's been actually really a positive thing, but it's hard to do. And a lot of people have a hard time doing that. So I don't know. If you don't know me, I'm Professor Dave Massack. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out that I want to pay the favor forward to help you out. Um, so the challenge with it is these things are at opposing ends and they do contradict with each other, right? So the more time that you spend with family means more time that you're not working. And the more time that you are, and whatever that family is, however you define it for you, and the more time that you spend working means the less time that you're actually doing, hanging out and having enjoyment. But the trick is to not balance those things, because there's a lot of moments where it's like out of kilter, but realizing the trick is using that out of kilter as the trigger of like, oh, something's not right here. We need to adjust things and go back to where you need to adjust things. And, it will happen where you will be working too much. And all of a sudden, something falls apart in your life. Whether it is you start getting physical ailments, something just doesn't is not jiving your relationship. So for me, it was with my wife. It could be with somebody else. Just doesn't work that well. You start maybe not liking as much being around each other, or it's just like, I know we definitely get in arguments and sort of have these spats or whatnot that last a few hours, but you do have like more of those when you're working too much, and you have to sit down and actually have a conversation, and you talk to your significant other, or your family members, and then you try to resolve that. And it's just like real tension where you're battling those two things and dedicating time and effort to both of those things. And it's a real tricky thing, but you can do it as long as you're being conscious about it, where you're balancing those two things and you're knowing that you're doing it. I think where it goes out of kilter is when you're like, I'm going to prioritize one over the other. And you really have to sort of stress those particular things where you're working together towards this thing. So you have to be able to get everybody in the relationship, excited about doing these things. And it's not always, it's hard to get both people excited. So my wife is definitely more of a free spirit, in the sense of, that's what Dave Ramsey talks about, is definitely a lot more of the sort of the free spirit with things. However, I've been fortunate enough is that she's also really uncertain when she makes decisions, that she'll just keep delaying things until we can have a longer conversation, which is actually a really, positive trait. That it'll just keep going. But in some ways, in other areas, I'm more of a free spirit with things like, going on vacations and things like that. I will just be like, well, let's just do it. So, we really work together in terms of pulling these joint objectives together. And you have to realize that's really what it's about, is it's not about, optimizing one thing. Because if you optimize one thing, what you're doing is going to fall apart. It really, truly is. It's the same as when you're running. It's very much an organization, right? Like a family is an organization. It's a two-person organization, and you have income coming in, and you can imagine like you're running a Fortune 500 company, and you've got to balance culture with also making some revenue, some stuff coming in. And each of those are, at ends. And you have to realize that if you don't work on culture, the revenue is not going to happen. Like, you're going to have some sort of life experience, where it's to the extreme, you might have a divorce or something like that, where that is very costly, and it takes a lot of effort, and it's not easy. And things just don't, it really does set you back, financially in your life. It might be sort of a step forward, but, it sets you back sort of financially with a lot of these things. So it's a big choice. And you have to sort of know that as you're doing these things, you definitely work on that culture where you do have, we had vacations and we did things, but they're probably not as big and as grand as what some other people did for a long time. We did go to we did the weddings, going to weddings and things like that. Like all of those things are really important, and you have to balance those things and work together towards balancing those things. So that's what I want to talk about is, if you want to achieve something that's important in your life, the first thing it's going to seem like it's totally impossible. Um, but if you keep working at it, things actually start clicking together, and you have to work on it in a much different way than what you're probably thinking about, that you just focus all you want on, at the objective of, making as much money and all that kind of stuff as much as you can. But instead, you want to balance the things that you're doing so you can actually, in the long run, achieve a bigger goal, and it's going to be sustainable to actually get there. I know that if I were to focus completely on work all the time, we wouldn't be together. My wife is a wonderful person, but she's not going to put up with that. And that's a good thing. And I wouldn't put up with that either. And we have long conversations about this. So that's what I want you to think about, is how do you balance these dueling objectives such that you can achieve a long-term objective in your life. So that, have a good one, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.